All right, we told you we would talk about this, but Florida State had a massive, massive recruiting weekend, and I'm, at the time of this recording, still getting information in. So I'm going to give you what I've been told so far, what's been maybe reported publicly on some guys. We'll try and give some credit where credit is due and go into pretty good depth on some of these in future videos this week. But it is obviously big time recruiting season at Florida State, and they had a massive weekend, a massive official visit weekend on campus this weekend. They've done a good job of stacking this the last couple of years. They've done a good job of getting really almost all of their major targets on campus that last weekend of official visits. Here it was that late June one. It's continued to be that. And whether guys are committed, uncommitted, or committed elsewhere, they've done a good job of getting their targets in. I'm going to give you some updates on some guys that I'm hearing a couple of different things about, some public interviews, just to kind of encapsulate it all. And then there's more that I'm digging on and trying to get information on that will be available. We'll put it on the channel. We'll obviously tweet about it and put it in our Discord that you can get by going to patreon.com/DFNS. But let's jump into it. Before we talk about any of the guys, it does feel this year, and I've talked to a couple of different guys that are pretty deep into the recruiting space, it feels like this year there's almost an apathy, not just among Florida State fans, but among recruiting fans in general, just because of how the last couple of years have gone, where the sport is right now, where we are with relation to NIL, with relation to the transfer portal, with relation to kids asking out of their national letters of intent, and just how influx the entire sport seems to be. It seems like there's almost an apathy. There's almost a like, man, I don't know how much I'm really going to invest or care about this right now. And, that's not very fun. That stinks, because recruiting is a huge part of the lifeblood of any program. But all of that said, whether you fall into that apathetic category or not, people are excited right now because there were a lot of stars on campus. There are a lot of 5 stars who were on campus, who shut things down, who seem like they're about to shut things down. It was pretty impressive to see, and so let's talk about some of those guys. Solomon Thomas, first up, Florida State commit. He's an offensive tackle that has been committed to Florida State since, I believe, December. It's been quite a while. A kid that Florida State certainly needs to hold on to, and there's been questions around Florida State holding on to him. Florida, LSU, both in there big time, trying to make inroads and trying to flip Florida State's top offensive tackle, offensive prospect, really top prospect in the last few years if you look at his actual rating. And I'm hearing good things out of the Solomon Thomas recruitment. I know other outlets have reported that he shut things down. I don't know that that's quite the case yet, but he did talk about being very close to that. I got good feedback. I still think LSU's your team to beat, and Florida's maybe in third place. I don't know that they're a serious competitor for it. I know that there have been talks and rumors about them flipping Solomon Thomas. I don't really buy that right now. Hopefully this doesn't get shared and clipped up later, but it still feels like to me that LSU is that main competition, if anyone is. Folks at Florida State seem to think that LSU is the main competition there for Solomon Thomas. So we'll see how that goes, but it would not surprise me at all if over the next couple of weeks you got an official statement that he shut things down and he wasn't going to entertain anything else. I don't think he's there right now, unless that's happened in the 12, 14 hours since we recorded this video and the time that you're watching it. But I do think it's coming soon. I think the Noles have done a great job of answering his questions that he had on development, and we may do a specific Solomon Thomas video this week because I thought some of his answers in his exit interview were really, really good. You go to Noles 247 to check out that exit interview. It's on their YouTube. You can find it different places on Twitter, but really good stuff there. Another 5-star offensive lineman, and if Florida State can pull this off, I think we're cooking with gas, right? Not to be cliche, not to over-exaggerate things or anything like that. Josh Petty. And there's been much made about his sister going to Florida State and how big that relationship is and everything else. And I think that is a factor, and I think that's helping Florida State here. But you don't just go to school just for that one reason. Like, you've got to have really good recruiters. You've got to have really good NIL in place. You've got to have a place where 5-star athletes feel good about getting to your campus and really doing a good job to convince them to go. It's not all just like, oh, you got family here? Well, then you're an automatic lock. Because we've seen that time and time again where a family member was there at a certain college and then a kid went somewhere else. So Josh Petty, I think the Noles are in a really good spot here for him. I haven't been told that it's a lock or done deal or he's a silent commit or anything like that. You've seen some predictions come in, whether they're from 247 or on 3. You've seen some people start to trend towards thinking that he is going to be a Seminole. I think if today was signing day, he would sign with the Noles. I really like where they sit for him. I like that they got him on the last visit. That's true for all of these guys that we'll talk about. I don't know that it's a done deal just yet. But again, if today was signing day, if today was commitment day, I think the Noles pick up their second 5-star on the offensive line. And then lastly, on the offensive line, no slight to a 4-star, but you could have your third blue chip guy in Peyton Joseph. I still really like where Florida State sits here. He's going to commit in early July. It's Florida State and Memphis. And although another rival school of Florida State's just lost somebody to Memphis, I don't think the Noles do. I think they end up locking him in. I think they end up getting his commitment. Obviously, there's a long way to go until signing day, but I think the Noles go 3 for 3 on those offensive linemen: Solomon Thomas, Josh Petty, and Peyton Joseph. That's projecting today. Things do change. Recruiting is insane and wild in this bag era, but I do think that as of today, I would project all 3 of them into Florida State's class. Defensive line, let's talk a little bit about that. Javion Hilson, we won't spend a ton of time here, but officially shut things down. Maybe if Texas had pulled out one more Lamborghini, they would have been able to get his services, but unfortunately they weren't able to, and Florida State ends up getting him to shut down his recruitment. I know there was a lot of talk about, what if Bama got back into it? What about Texas? What about this school? Florida at one time really thought they were in a good spot there. Javion Hilson shuts it down, says he won't take any more visits. Obviously, if he was to reopen that, that'd be bad news, but I don't think he will. I think Florida State's done a good job of kind of reminding him why he committed in the first place, and I think that they're going to get a massive stud there in Javion Hilson. A 5-star right now, number 1 edge prospect right now. We'll see how his senior season goes. Because he's not committed to Georgia or Alabama, I'm sure he'll drop some, but proud of him shutting it down and sticking it out with the Noles. How about a flip target? Jalen Wiggins, currently committed to Florida right now. Here's one that I have thought the Noles have been trending in the right direction for a while. Local Tallahassee kid, edge prospect. I really like Jalen Wiggins a lot. And I think, I've thought the Noles were trending very well for him for quite a while. I do have a concern about Jalen Wiggins. I'll talk to you about that concern after I tell you about our Patreon and our Discord, patreon.com/DFNS. You can go there right now. You can sign up for as little as $3 a month. There are several different options on the Patreon that you can go check out if you want to just support because you like this content, or if you want a little bit more information on some guys that we're not going to have time to go over, or a little bit more in-depth information. There's some stuff on a couple of the commits that I'll allude to here, but I won't outright say. Some stuff that I don't know that it necessarily needs to be public information. Patreon.com/DFNS. Several of you have already joined there. I know you have, but for those that are newer, maybe just finding the channel, you're welcome to go and support there. We'll try and give you access to our Discord where we discuss some of this stuff a little bit deeper as well. Jalen Wiggins, again, he said that he's going to take a couple of weeks, think it over, and then make a final decision between Florida State and Florida. What I don't necessarily like about that is I'd love if he made that process go even further and he really took his recruitment until December. If that was the case, I'd feel really good about the Noles flipping him. Number one, I don't think his head coach is going to be there once he gets there. And if he was to shut things down here in July and then Napier was to get fired, I think he'd probably be open to opening things back up and potentially flipping at that time. However, I think time is what kills all deals. And I think time would help Florida State here. And I'm not saying that just because he's deciding in a couple of weeks, there's no chance that he flips, but I think that's a benefit for Florida. I think him shutting it down or keeping it open or shutting it down or flipping one, I think that's a benefit for Florida if he's doing it here within the next couple of weeks. I'm not saying that he can't flip to Florida State, not saying that I have a lack of confidence that Florida State's recruiting him well. I just think that possibly shutting it down over the next couple of weeks is a help for Florida. We'll see. That's not me telling you that he's not going to flip. I don't have a great gut on it right now. I'd say that, kids are more likely to stick than to flip in general. So if I had to predict it right now, I'd say he probably ends up sticking with Florida for now. What changes over there through this year? How do their seasons look? Would he be open to reopening it up? He's still very close there in Tallahassee. You have to imagine he's going to be at some games this year. Hopefully that one at the end of the year where we beat their brains in for the third year in a row. But if you're asking me to predict it right now, I'd probably have Wiggins sticking with UF. I'd love to be wrong there. Kevin Wynn. is another defensive lineman that seems like the Noles made a really good push with, could decide any day. He just said his commitment's going to be soon. I think the Noles made a really good impression here. A couple of guys put crystal balls in for him. A couple of guys predicted. I heard really good things out of this. I think he connected well. I think Odell is kind of on a redemption tour right now and may surprise some people with some defensive line commits. Obviously, big shout out to Coach Papp with Hilson as well. But I think that Kevin Wynn is one that you could see commit here before the end of June, like literally before July turns around. I think Kevin Wynn could be lighting it up on Instagram, on Twitter with Hayes Fawcett with a commitment graphic. Here's a big one that we did an entire video on. Part of our Brady commitment video for the 2026 quarterback was just all about Tramel Jones. I know there's been questions about will he stick, will he not? I get the sense right now that Tramel probably sticks with Florida State. I don't think it's a done deal by any means, but kind of like I told you on Jalen Wiggins, it sounds like Tramel's going to take a week or so and analyze things, think it all back over one more time, and then make a final decision. That probably bodes well for Florida State. I don't necessarily think that those would be kind of words he would use if he was just about to flip. I think Florida State has a confidence. I've been told by at least one source that Florida State has a confidence that he is going to lock it down, shut it down, and tell Florida to kick rocks. We'll see what happens with that. Again, recruiting is crazy. I can, with full confidence, and I went a little more in depth on this in Discord than I'll go here. So again, sign up for the Patreon if you want this info. But I know Florida's throwing a boatload of money at him. I know that Florida is more aggressive with their NIL offer than Florida State is right now. It costs more to flip something than it does to originally, lock something in, right? It makes sense. But I think they're even being more aggressive than that. So all that said, I do think Tramel ends up sticking. Again, might get 2 or 3 things revisited on this video, but I think the Noles hold on to QB1 in the 2025 class, which is a win. Probably leads us really very, very well into our next recruit that we'll talk about, and that's Vernell Brown III. Florida legacy like 18 times over. I never bought that Florida State was going to be able to win out on this recruitment, and I still don't believe that they will. I think Vernell had a great visit. He talked about Mike Norvell being his favorite coach in college football. I believe that. I don't think he's just blowing smoke. I don't think he's lying about that by any means. I mean, you look at the idiot that they've got over there in Gainesville. I know Billy Napier is not his favorite coach. There's been rumors or scuttlebutt about, his dad, who worked for Napier when Anthony Richardson was there, and it's very close to Anthony Richardson. I don't know if he's his manager or what, but has some kind of role like that. Didn't like the way that he was handled, kind of caused a riff. Weren't sure if Vernell Brown III was going to end up there because of that. I still never bought into that. I think when you're born into that legacy, it's hard to break through. I know Tom Loy of 247 reported that he wasn't taking his eyes off Florida State just yet. Again, I don't know that I'm buying that. I still think it's UF for Vernell Brown. If Tramel shuts it down and stays with Florida State here in the next week or so, maybe that helps you down the stretch. But some of my UF folks have some pretty good confidence that Vernell is coming to UF, and I think it's going that way as well. So if they miss on Vernell Brown, obviously, where do you turn to a wide receiver? Well, I think they turn to Dalen McCutcheon, who I do think they're trending well for. I know we got a prediction on 247. I know there's others that think that the Noles are doing a really good job here, but I was kind of told the same thing, even as the weekend was getting underway, that Florida State had a confidence there. And I think they can also read the writing on the wall with Vernell Brown and say, like, hey, man, we got to go all in on Dalen McCutcheon. I think a really talented wide receiver, a really talented athlete that you can get in. One of the better wide receiver prospects that you've brought in. Obviously, I know Hakeem's there. I know Elijah Moore is there. I know you've brought in some really good talent. But this would be, kind of a top dog in that wide receiver class just in general. So getting him in would be really big for the Noles. And I think the Noles get it done. Zay Thomas, Gregory Xavier Thomas, Florida State Clemson battle. I have felt really good about Florida State for a very long time here. I think this gets done. I think you pull this one in. I think he's announcing first week of July, maybe. It's very soon. It's within a week or two here. We'll obviously have a pre-record ready, and we'll have that out on the channel the second that he does. But I think that the Noles have kind of led here forever, and I think they'll finish it off. Really impressive South Florida athlete. I think, he's going to help you there. Going to American Heritage, the Pat Sartain ties and everything else. this is a Florida State battle to lose, and I don't think they do lose it. I think they ended up beating Clemson here and then beating them again in October. So Zay Thomas, I think, is a null. And then we'll wrap up with this. I know there's some other ones that we didn't get to, but this is the last big one that I got information on was Tavion Wallace. I think Florida State's very confident here. In fact, in our Discord, I'll probably put a prediction in for Florida State to end up sealing the deal. I know that Florida made a late push here, but I think Tavion Wallace is going to be a null. Hey, shout out Randy Shannon. We were critical of Randy Shannon and Papuchis and Odell's cycles last year and not super impressed. If they pull in some of the guys that we've mentioned here, I think we'll be pretty happy with that. You think about that, defensive ends of, Hilson, you maybe flip Wiggins, you get Wynn, you had Amari in the last class that reclassified, but he's essentially a 25 as well. Amari Williams, you've got a really good core there, and you've really rebuilt that room back up, and a room that we kind of looked at and thought like, man, what are two rooms, right? Defensive end, defensive tackle, man, what are we going to do there? You start to answer some of those questions. Tavion Wallace does the same thing. Can they get back in on some of the other linebackers? Is Randy Sale realistic? Is Jackson realistic? I don't know, but I think Tavion Wallace is a really good start and somebody that can kind of get you going in the right direction there in the linebacker room, a really elite talent. And I do think that the Noles do a really good job there and ended up locking him up. I think he's committing on July 2nd. Zay Thomas, who I just talked about, I think June 30th is his date. There are other guys that didn't make it to campus this weekend, not necessarily scheduled, but the Josh Moore stuff is pretty big. I think he's going to pick the Gators here on the 25th, just a couple of days from today. Actually, if you're watching this on Monday, tomorrow, I think he'll pick UF. But the Noles are in really good shape for a lot of guys. I think you could see kind of a flow of commitments over the next week and a half. That's what we saw last year from this last weekend in June for recruiting all the way up through July 4th, July 8th, July 10th, I think might have been the last one. Jonathan Daniels may have been somewhere around, July 10th or something like that. Florida State just had a ton of commitments in that time frame. I think you're going to see that again here in the next week or so. So exciting times. Again, we went deeper into some of these. Tramel Jones specifically talked some of the backstory there. We talked a little bit about the backstory on Josh Moore and some other ones as well. Fernell Brown thoughts. So if you haven't already, go to patreon.com/DFNS and get that access there. If you don't care about any of that and you just want to support, you can also do that there. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you missed the Brady Smigel episode where we talked a little bit about Tramel Jones, talked a lot about Brady and what Florida State's getting in that 2026 QB commit, you can click the video on the screen right now to check it out.